Hey everyone, it's Matt. In this video, we'll be discussing 3 different investing styles, including investing for appreciation, cash flow, and preservation, all of which have their own unique set of objectives, strengths and weaknesses, and I'll be sharing with you some examples for each style. Let's get right into the information. But hey, if you're new here, welcome to the channel. I really appreciate you checking me out. Make sure to hit that subscribe button right below the video, and if you're returning, welcome back. Let's get right into the content and talk about number 1, appreciation, or as some people call it, capital gains. These phrases are used interchangeably, but essentially it's the same thing. The idea behind this style is buying something today at a price and selling it at some point in the future at a higher price. So let me get into a couple examples and then we can talk about the strengths and weaknesses of this style. So my first example is talking about a stock. All right, so you buy a stock today for $10. You have the intentions of selling it when it hits $15. Now, the time that it takes for this to happen, we don't know. It could happen in a week, it could happen in a month, it could take 5 years. We don't know that, but the intentions are buying it today at 10, selling it when it hits 15. In this scenario, or in this example, the appreciation would be $5 per share because you bought it at 10, you sold it at 15, $5 is the appreciation or the capital gain. All right, so let's use a real estate example now. You buy a house today for $100,000. You have the intentions of selling it in 5 years for $150,000. Again, in this case, your capital gain or your appreciation is $50,000. Over that 5-year period, the house went up in value by $50,000 from the 100 where you bought it until where you sold it, $50,000. It gained in value, it appreciated by $50,000. So let's talk about the strengths and weaknesses of this style. Strengths being, it's a long-term investing strategy. Typically, when you're going for appreciation, it is long-term investing. You're putting a bunch of money in today with the intentions of cashing out at some point in the future and letting whatever you've invested in appreciate over that time period. Here's some of the weaknesses. You put all that money in, and that money is locked up for some unspecified amount of time. Maybe you know that you're going to get out regardless in 5 years. But either way, you're locking up, in most cases, a substantial amount of capital for that specific period of time with the intentions of getting out. So, long-term appreciation investing is actually good for a lot of people because it allows you to lock up all that money, not be able to touch it, and then all of a sudden you come back in, however long it is, a few months, a few years, maybe it's a decade from now, and you cash out with a big lump sum of cash. So that is one of the strengths and or weaknesses. You just have to figure out what actually benefits your personality and your investing style. All right. Let's get into number 2, investing for cash flow, which also just so happens to be my favorite style of investing. With this style, an investor is going after the cash or the cash flow that is thrown off from the investment either on usually a monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, or annual basis. Let's get into a couple examples and then we can talk about the strengths and weaknesses also compared to investing for appreciation like we just discussed. All right, example number 1. Let's go back to the stock example. A person could invest in a dividend-paying stock or basket of dividend-paying stocks with the intentions of going after the quarterly dividend. Now, the dividend would be the cash flow that investment would be throwing off. Remember our example from appreciation, where the investor just invests in the stock with the intentions of selling it at some point in the future for a higher price? Well, there's actually 2 ways that you can capitalize on this type of investing. So, with the cash flow aspect, you would buy the stock with the intentions of gathering or capturing the quarterly dividend payments, otherwise known as the cash flow. So you're getting that cash flow quarter after quarter that the company is paying you as an investor. At the same time, you could be getting appreciation on that investment provided the stock price has actually gone up from where you've bought it at some point. However, Many people that invest in dividend-paying stocks are usually going after the dividend on a quarterly basis versus the appreciation. The appreciation in this case is usually just a bonus that the person gets at some point in the future if they decide to sell the stock. But realistically, they're going after the dividend that is being distributed. So that would be the cash flow when it comes to investing in a dividend-paying stock. However, one of the weaknesses of this style of investing for stocks is that the dividends that are paid out are actually taxable income. Now, all income is taxable, of course, but there is actually a strategy that I'm going to talk about right now, investing in rental real estate for cash flow, where your cash flow can actually be wiped out through another strategy, which I'll talk about here in just a second. Let's talk about the second example within the cash flow style, which is investing in rental real estate for cash flow. So in this scenario, what would be the cash flow when you invest in rental real estate? Well, let me give you a quick example on this. Let's say you own a property, you rent it out each month for $1,000. You have $800 of expenses on the property each month. Maybe that's in the form of a mortgage, interest, maybe association dues, property taxes, upkeep, everything like that is all encompassed in the $800 that you have in expenses each month. Well, you take your $1,000 that you receive, you minus off the $800 that you would spend on expenses, leaving you with $200. The $200 is your monthly cash flow. That $200 a monthly cash flow, once again, just like the stock example, is taxable income. However, there is a strategy when it comes to rental real estate, something called depreciation, where when you apply the depreciation to your property year over year, basically all of the cash flow that you have received has been wiped out to zero. So essentially the $200 every month that you've been collecting on your rental property, or over the course of an entire year, $2,400 in most scenarios, is completely wiped out to zero because of depreciation. So essentially the cash flow on rental real estate, if you're doing it right, is tax-free income. So what are some of the strengths versus weaknesses for cash flow investing versus appreciation? Or just in general, what are some of the strengths and weaknesses? Well, like I said, in some of my examples that I've been given here, I basically told you the strengths already. Strengths are you're getting monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, annual cash flow out of your investment. That's awesome. Everybody wants a check in their mailbox, right? Every month, every quarter, a direct deposit into your account. Everybody wants that. So the cash flow is really nice, especially when it comes to real estate. You actually can get all of that cash flow as tax-free income as a result of depreciation. Now, what are some of the weaknesses? Well, one of the weaknesses being, like I said in my stock example, if you're investing in stocks and going after the dividend, unfortunately, yes, you'd be getting all that cash flow on a quarterly basis throughout the year. However, that is going to be taxable income with, unfortunately, like the example that I gave you with real estate, you don't have depreciation to wipe out those capital gains. So in that case, you would actually be paying taxes on your capital gains that you would be receiving, or your dividend payments, I should say, from your stock investments. So I hope that makes sense. Now, let's get into number 3. Investing for preservation. Now, this is a more conservative way of investing. However, there is space for it in everyone's portfolio, a portion of it anyway. Now, the idea behind this type of investing is the preservation of capital. In other words, buying something with value that's always going to hold value, a store of value, so that at some point in a complete loss of purchasing power with our currency or a complete loss of confidence in our fiat currency, we can always go back to whatever this is, our preservation or our store of value, and we can always extract value out of it. So let me give you a couple examples. In this situation, many people would turn to precious metals, gold, silver, palladium, platinum, all of these metals that contain intrinsic value, something that's always going to have value. Gold and silver are probably the most Popular, by far the most popular precious metals that people invest in, but this is just one way that you can buy something today, and in 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, it's still going to have value, whereas our paper currency that we currently have now, 100 years from now, realistically, probably won't even exist anymore. In 1,000 years from now, it'll be a long lost memory. That's just the sad truth of the matter. So, like I said earlier, this is a conservative way of investing because it's not throwing off any cash flow like I talked about in my last example. It's possibly appreciating in value, probably is appreciating in value over time, but typically precious metals appreciate in value much more slowly than other things like stock, real estate, and many other investments if you're going for cash flow and or appreciation. However, it is a really nice store of value. In fact, I really like silver. I have a little bit of silver myself. And it's not something that I invest in simply because, I want to get cash flow out of this, but it's something that I just really enjoy having. When I'm holding the silver bar in my hand, there's something about it that feels really, really cool, right? So, this is something that people do. Maybe they park a percentage of their investable capital. Maybe it's 2%, maybe it's 5%, maybe it's 10%. It completely depends on the person and their investing style. But essentially what they're doing is they're saying, hey, I don't exactly believe in the US dollar anymore. The purchasing power is evaporating literally on basically a quarterly or annual basis. The purchasing power of the American dollar is depleting, and I want something that's going to hold its value. It's going to store its value into the future. So maybe that person decides to buy, 100 ounces of silver, something like that. If it's someone buying 100 ounces of gold, they probably have pretty deep pockets. That would be pretty cool. But anyway, this is another strategy, another way that people can park some money to the side, put it in something that they can always believe in and always lean back on in the event of an absolute meltdown in the financial markets, whether it's real estate, the stock market, something else they can kind of lean on and just say, hey, when all else fails, I have all of this here, gold or silver. So some of the strengths would be you have something, you put some money, you park some money in an investment, it's always going to have value. Some of the weaknesses, basically you're parking your money in this investment, it's not cash flowing, it probably is appreciating over time, but realistically you're parking money there and you're probably never going to exit that position. Realistically, unless the price goes really, really high, most likely if you own a bunch of silver, you're probably going to hold on to it for probably the majority of your life and possibly even pass it on at some point later in your life. So, kind of one of the weaknesses, but at the same time, there's a ton of value in owning precious metals or these types of preservation type investments. So I hope you enjoyed this video and found it to be a little bit informative to introduce you to some of the different investing styles. Now, of course, we only talked about 3 today. There are so many different ways that you can invest. It all depends on what are your objectives, what is consistent with your personality. Do you want to go with the long game, as in park some capital somewhere, come back in 5, 10, 15, maybe 20 years and cash out with a large capital gain lump sum amount? Or are you someone that maybe wants to invest in something more like cash flow, where you can be rewarded on maybe a monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, or annual basis where you're getting consistent cash flow? At the same time, maybe you're someone who wants to go with more of a conservative approach where you just say, hey, I have some cash sitting around. I'm not really sure what I want to do with it. I want to make sure it preserves its value. Let me buy a bunch of silver or gold. Again, there is no right or wrong answer to any of this. It's all consistent with what is best for your investing style, your personality, and your objectives. So I hope this introduced you to a couple different ideas and gave you some examples of these different styles and maybe get you thinking a little bit, because, you know, we got to be our own best advocates for everything out there. There's a lot of different information out there, and I love looking into all this stuff, but I wanted to give you kind of a little introductory type video into some different investing styles. I love talking about this kind of stuff. Of course, I will have follow-up videos to all of this information. I hope you found this to be helpful. Please feel free to share this video with your friends, family, social media, anybody that could benefit from this information. Thanks so much for your continued support. I truly appreciate it, and I'll catch you in the next video. Make sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you in the next video.